Is this empire the same as the deep state? What would it take to greatly weaken or destroy this empire? Does Trump know about this empire? I've never heard him mention it, and he seems to be enamored by the empire's public faces, e.g. the British monarchy. Yeah, you're right. And Trump has gone to see he went to visit the Queen in his first administration, and I believe he's scheduled to meet with King Charles in September. All right, okay. I'm a new viewer, and I'm unclear concerning your frequent references to the British financial empire. What evidence do you have that London controls global finance, or that America is part of that empire and therefore subservient in some way? John. Okay, I'd like Barbara or Susan to begin to address these questions about the British financial empire.
I think first, Adam, I'd like to go to the slideshow on the City of London as a way of starting to actually get at this. All right. I said here, I'm just going to give you a short overview by addressing the City of London question in some slides. First and foremost, we're not talking about the United Kingdom. We're not talking about England. We're not talking about Scotland. We're talking about the corporation that lives in 1 square mile of London, England. And that corporation has existed since approximately 1100 and grown in influence throughout that period of time. To give you an example of its relationship to British royalty, the king has to ask permission of the Lord Mayor to enter. All right, so that's basically the City of London's structure is a corporation. Now, how powerful is it in terms of finances? Well, it's approximately 50% or more, we don't really know, of the world's entire financial flows. It's ranked slightly behind Wall Street as the major player in international finance, but Wall Street itself and the City of London are totally integrated. When the Euro bond market, so-called, emerged, Wall Street went to London and opened up shop. And so it's very hard to tell the difference between many Wall Street firms like JP Morgan Chase and city firms, since they exist within that 1 square mile and trade in major commodities and everything else. So that's the City of London proper, that 1 square mile. When you add in Hong Kong, Singapore, and the British overseas territories and dependencies, along with Canada, you actually have the dominant financial power in the world, particularly in terms of offshore funds, what a lot of people call dirty money laundering, insurance, obviously that's critical to all world trade, foreign exchange, and most importantly, commodities. As opposed to Wall Street, which primarily speculates in paper, these guys speculate in raw materials and commodities. So they actually have kind of a chokehold on major issues within the world's physical economy. Also, they control most of the world's derivatives trade. So from the standpoint of funny money and that kind of power in international finance, you really can't get much better. How do they control things? Well, I said, then there is Harvard. What you're talking about here is the hold of sort of what we call the British axioms of what are human beings, and how that influences or has influenced our education system, the writing of our history, and most specifically our own foreign policy. Harvard University, Yale, Columbia, the Ivy League schools, along with Oxford and Cambridge, have been educating and grooming grounds for our elites during the entire last century. These schools have led the way in rewriting our history. Harvard's William Yandell Elliott was a conscious British agent, and he trained Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, and others to run our foreign policy with British imperial assumptions about the exercise of political power. The Council on Foreign Relations, which influences all of our policy, is a copy of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, or Chatham House, as it's called. And basically, our foreign policy mirrors that. If you actually take them and look at them and say, okay, what does the RIIA say today? And then you put it up against what does the Council of Foreign Relations say today about our foreign policy, you're going to see that we trail the RIIA. And basically the same people founded both of these institutions in one fell swoop after World War I. The impact on Washington, D.C., well, let's look at the major think tanks: the Atlantic Council, the German Marshall Fund, the Center for New American Security, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the Hudson Institute. When the House of Lords came to Washington, D.C. in 2018 to assess the status of their interests here, they visited these think tanks, every single one of them, and the Congress. They said that these think tanks actually, along with the Congress and our intelligence community, were still very well controlled despite Donald Trump. That doesn't even take into account their influence in New York through the Morgan interest, the Rockefeller interest, and major players like BlackRock, Blackstone, KKR, Goldman Sachs, etc. All of those companies, as I said before, effectively merged with the city. Now, I add the last part, which is called sponsorship of destructive mind cults. The World Wildlife Fund for Nature was founded by Prince Philip, along with the former Nazi, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, and that kicked off the entire environmentalist movement worldwide. The World Economic Forum was founded by Klaus Schwab, who got his bearings from Henry Kissinger's summer Harvard seminars. Prince Charles immediately became an advocate of the WEF. The Bilderberg Group, founded in 1953, and the Mount Palawan Society, founded in 1947, became the key influence and consensus building groups for British imperial policies. So basically, that shows you, in some sense, the breadth of the modern British Empire. If you need a map in your mind, think about the fact that basically, if you look at a map of the world, you would see that they actually have about 30% of the world's population and 28.3% of world land area in what's called the British Commonwealth, which is composed both of countries which recognize Elizabeth or Charles now as the sovereign. That's 16 countries. That includes Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, and New Zealand as major countries, and a ton of offshore locations, and 37 other countries which were former colonies of the British Empire, which exist allegedly independently, but are still major influenced by their British heritage. So that includes places like India, Cyprus, Malaysia, Pakistan, South Africa, all of the, Australia and New Zealand's dependencies. So it gives you a sense that this is very significant and is not some poor, forgotten power as it's portrayed, but a major force in the world, which Donald Trump, quite frankly, is dealing with. He's not doing it as some people would like by coming out and saying, this is the British Empire, and I'm going to make a map in my mind of all the connectos of what it is. That's what Susan, I think, is going to talk about a little bit, about the difference between a mindset which looks at description and nouns versus a mindset which is actually destroying the power of this thing through very concrete actions. In other words, if you look at all of these trade deals, we again are becoming the dominant power in the world economically. We became, under the prior regime, effectively a colony. We were exporting food, we were exporting oil, but our industry and our manufacturing capacity was completely dependent on other nations. We had essentially forfeited our sovereignty. Now we're winning that back by trade deals, by tariffs, by actually wielding power in the world again. Some people like to call that bullying. I call it actually reasserting the power of the United States and our Constitution in the world versus this awful empire. So that's how I would do the overview here in answer to that question.
Thank you very much, Barbara. If you're new here or if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Adam Sturman. I am the webmaster and video producer for Promethean Action. Joining us today are Barbara Boyd Barbara Boyd is the treasurer of Promethean PAC. And we're also joined by Susan Koina, who is representing Promethean Action. What we're doing today is very simple. We are taking the questions, we're prioritizing the questions from our newsletter subscribers. We're going to be doing this show every week on Thursday. So if this show is interesting, if this interests you, you want to be a part of it, I'm going to put the link to join our free newsletter. And throughout the week, I'll send out emails to you. I'll put the link where we collect our questions for next Thursday. So if you're not a member, you can go to a website, prom.ac. Yes, that's an actual website. It'll redirect you. Or if you're watching on a TV, just search the web for Promethean Action. We should be the first hit. And just sign up for a free newsletter and you'll be able to submit your question for next